Since its premiere in 2010, The Walking Dead has been defined not only by its raw depiction of survival and horror, but also by the emotional weight of its character deaths. Across its 11 seasons, the series has delivered some truly shocking moments, ones that have left fans heartbroken. So today, I thought we'd delve into every season of the show and say what the saddest character death in that season is. So, without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Season 1 of The Walking Dead lays the foundations for what is to come, and although it's the shortest season in the entire show, coming in at just 6 episodes, it still has its fair share of deaths. Some notable sad moments in this season are Jackie and Dr. Jenna's death in episode 6 as they choose to opt out, and also Amy's death at the Atlanta camp. Seeing Andrea cradle her younger sister's lifeless corpse until she reanimated was particularly sad, but in my opinion, the absolute saddest death from season 1 is Jim's. Jim begins as a relatively quiet member of our group. He keeps to himself while still grappling with the trauma of losing his own family. His backstory is hinted at through brief conversations with other characters, but it's just enough for the audience to understand that Jim is a deeply wounded man, and when he's bitten during the Walker attack on the camp, the inevitability of his fate starts to become clear. But Jim's death is a turning point for our group. It's the first time the survivors are forced to confront the reality that not everybody can be saved, and it demonstrates how naive they all were at this point in the story. Jim frantically starts digging because he had no idea what to do, and it represents a man who's not ready to die, but he knows that's what his fate will be. And it's made even worse by the fact Rick and the others believed he could truly be saved by going to the CDC. Ultimately, Jim decides to take matters into his own hands, and he asks to be left behind under a tree as our group all say goodbye to him one by one and slowly drive away into the distance. We are then left with Jim alone, bathed in sunlight, slowly dying under that very tree. There's no music, there's no gore or violence. It's just a man who's been forced to accept his fate, and it's quietly one of the most devastating moments in the entire series. It's one of the group's first moral dilemmas, and Jim's reanimated corpse either wanders the plains to this day or is still lying there under this very tree. So for me, that's why Jim's death is the saddest from season 1. Season 2 is not only my favourite season of the entire series, but one in which character dynamics drive the narrative, meaning characters are a lot more fleshed out here, and when they inevitably die, it means it hits a lot closer to home. There are some shocking and sad deaths throughout season 2 of the show. Firstly, Otis, but this falls more onto the side of shocking in my opinion, and a strong contender for season 2 is Sophia. Seeing a distraught Carol held back by Daryl as her little girl steps out of the barn as a walker is truly shocking and pretty sad, but I still think there's a death that tops it. But how could we talk about season 2 and not mention Shane's death in the episode Better Angels? And although this moment would change the show forever and help to set a darker tone for the whole series, in my opinion, it definitely leans more onto the side of shocking rather than outright sad. I mean, Shane's one of my favourite characters in the entire show, but it's hard to argue that he didn't deserve to die. He slept with Rick's wife, he killed Otis and Randall, and then tried to kill Rick himself. So yeah, he probably did deserve his fate. So for me, the saddest death in season 2 is Dale's. Like many others, I absolutely love Dale. He was the father of the group, he was a voice of reason in a chaotic world, and he constantly challenged decisions and clung on to his pre-apocalypse values. He was a moral compass in every sense of the word, and he truly was too good for this world. I mean, Dale had a heart of gold, and seeing him die was just soul destroying. On top of this, Dale's death sequence is just pure cinema, in the most gut-wrenching way, no pun intended. As he's out wandering at night, letting off steam after the group's decision to execute Randall, he's suddenly attacked by a walker, the same walker Carl plays with in the forest and lets escape from the mud. Not only putting an immense amount of guilt onto the character of Carl, but also demonstrating to us the true dangers of this world. Following Dale's scuffle with the walker, Rick steps up to put a suffering Dale down, but he just can't bring himself to do it. So Daryl takes over, mutters the word "sorry brother" and pulls the trigger. What makes this scene even sadder is the face of Dale as he looks back at Daryl. I mean, the pain and terror in his eyes as he realises what the group's going to do is just so sad. And for such a morally good person, he gets an incredibly gruesome and brutal death. Dale's so important to our group as he keeps them grounded, and his absence leaves not just an emotional void, but also an ethical one. So for those reasons, I'm giving the saddest death of Season 2 to Dale. After the fall of Hershel's farm, we see our group relocate to the prison, whilst also encountering the show's first true antagonist, that of course being the governor. Andrea meets her demise in Season 3, but I think most fans actively celebrated this death rather than grieved it, so we can count her out. But some notably sad deaths in Season 3 are Milton, just as he'd grown a backbone and stood up to the governor, Axel and Oscar, the prisoners who ended up joining our group for a brief period of time, and of course Merle Dixon, as he completes his redemption arc attempting to take out the governor only to be killed himself. And then for Daryl to find his reanimated corpse. This moment shapes Daryl forever, and the scene of him crying at the sight of his dead brother is incredibly powerful and heartbreaking. But for me, there's two standouts in Season 3. You have T-Dog and Lorie Grimes, and although T-Dog, another fan favourite, gets bitten and then sacrifices himself, although incredibly sad, at least he went out like a hero. Lorie's death, on the other hand, showed us all the reality of survival in a world like this, and for that reason she is taking the top spot. Now, say what you like about the character of Lorie Grimes, but that scene with her and Carl is one of the best in the entire show. It's acted to perfection as she tells Carl he's going to beat this world before essentially sacrificing herself to give birth. And just to rub insult to injury, Carl is the one to put down his own reanimated mother, marking one of the most traumatizing moments in his life and shaping his character for seasons to come. And the following scene that would become a meme forever is the depiction of raw grief as Rick slowly breaks down, realizing his wife is dead, and the other characters just all look on in disbelief. And Lorie's death is made even worse by the effects it has on Rick Grimes as a character. It's that crushing realization that he never got a chance to fully reconcile with her that eats him alive, and he starts to hallucinate her and just go insane. Lorie Grimes' death is so sad because it is layered with sacrifice. Lorie's final act ensured her daughter's survival, but it came at the cost of leaving her son. So for those reasons, Lorie Grimes' death is the saddest in Season 3. Season 4 is one of the most brutal seasons in the entire series, as we see the return of the governor, the fall of the prison, and our group being split up. Some noticeable sad deaths do include Karen, David, and Lily, as well as Megan, obviously the little girl who the governor basically adopts. But there are once again two clear instances that stand out to me. The death of Mika and then subsequently Lizzie is one of the most tragic and gut-wrenching episodes in the entire show. I mean, I've made a whole video going over it, but essentially we see the death of two children, one totally innocent and one who had been driven to insanity by the world she inhabited, made even worse by the fact they are children, adding to the heartbreak. But in my opinion, the saddest death in Season 4 and the entire series is of course Hershel Green. Hershel meets his demise in a tense standoff in the episode Too Far Gone, and Hershel's death stands out as one of the most heart-wrenching moments in the entire series, and his death is not only emotionally devastating for the audience, but it also marks a turning point for our group. By the time of his death, Hershel had grown from a cautious, distrustful farmer into the moral centre of our group. A skilled medic, a wise advisor, and a father figure to many, Hershel believed in the importance of compassion and community, and he was a voice of reason, urging people to find peaceful solutions instead of letting violence and fear dictate their actions. He was in every sense the beating heart of our group, and to be killed off in such a senseless manner by the governor was totally devastating. Hershel's death was brutal, but it also symbolised so much. It not only declared that violence and domination had won over diplomacy and compassion, but also the stability of our group was totally lost. After his death, the prison, once a safe haven, fell immediately, the survivors were scattered, their unity was destroyed, and the guiding voice that often pulled them back from the brink was now gone. From that point onwards, Rick and co became hardened survivors and started to become more ruthless, making decisions that Hershel himself would have opposed to had he been alive. And his death is arguably the most pivotal moment in the entire series, as it would change every character forever. Hershel's death is just soul-crushing. I mean, Rick's pleas and speech to the governor, his daughters looking on helplessly, and even the governor's own soldiers slowly realising what a monster he truly is. It's one of the saddest moments in the whole show, and it's acted to perfection by not just Andrew Lincoln as Rick Grimes, but also the late Scott Wilson as Hershel Green. So for those reasons, the saddest death in Season 4 has to be Hershel. Season 5 has its ups and downs. One moment our group is stuck inside a cannibal's train car, and the next they've found a community that seems too good to be true. And there are so many characters in Season 5 that we are bound to see some terribly sad deaths. I'd like to shout out Bob Stuckey, as he was a ray of sunshine and optimism during the latter half of Season 4 and early parts of Season 5, and his death is pretty sad, but he still manages to be positive even in his final moments, which does kind of make you feel a little bit better about him dying, so I'm going to count that one out. Tyrese's death is another strong contender. The effect it has on his sister Sasha and the funeral they give him are just some tear-jerking stuff, and Tyrese was quietly one of the group's most important members, especially in keeping baby Judith alive. And my final shout out goes to Noah. This one is particularly tragic in the sense we never got much time with him. He joins our group after the Grady Hospital storyline, and he dies before the end of the season. Noah had heaps of potential and had expressed an interest in architecture under the guidance of Reg Monroe, so it's a shame he met his end so abruptly and never got to live out that storyline. Also, Glenn's reaction to Noah's death just made it hit even harder. But the saddest death in Season 5, in my opinion, is Beth Green's. Beth is a character who had just started to blossom, and her friendship with Daryl is one of the highlights of Season 4 for me. I think the timing of Beth's death is particularly sad because it comes right at the moment of reunion and hope in the series. Fresh off the success that was the Terminus escape and the feeling of our group being able to conquer anything, Beth's rescue looked like another win for our group. The tense standoff between Rick and the hospital staff seemed like it was going to end peacefully, with both sides agreeing to the trade. Then, in an instant, everything went wrong, and Beth is tragically killed. Look, I think Beth's death was totally needless, which only adds insult to injury. It was one that should have never happened, and it shocked the audience not in a good way. And the scene of a distraught Daryl carrying her lifeless corpse down and seeing Maggie's smile slowly fade to agony is just really sad. I think Beth had a lot more to give in the series. Add on top of this the now haunting argument that her and Daryl have at the end of Season 4, where she basically predicts her own death, and Daryl infamously says, "You're not ever going to see Maggie again," only for those words to eventually ring true. Just add further emotional weight to this death. Look, Beth's death is sad because it's avoidable and it leaves other characters scarred forever. So for those reasons, I'm picking Beth as the saddest death from Season 5. Now, Season 6 is probably the hardest for me to rank on this whole list, not in terms of the magnitude of character deaths, but purely down to how few there are. On top of this, there's no one I personally really cared about all that much. Denise's death at the hands of Dwight was shocking, especially just as she started to get more screen time and developed a relationship with Tara. Eastman's death, despite only appearing in a singular episode, is pretty emotional and has a profound impact on the character of Morgan Jones. And my final shout out for Season 6 goes to Diana Monroe, as her death was shocking and symbolised the passing of the torch over to Rick. And I also think she as a character is pretty underrated as a whole. But the saddest death, in my opinion, is Jesse Anderson. Not that this death is overly sad or tragic at all, it's more of a fact, like I said earlier, there just aren't that many sad deaths in season 6. But saying that, I guess the fact both of her kids died right alongside her did make it a tad bit more emotional. But Sam was whiny and annoying, and Ron tried to kill Rick, only to be sliced in half by Michonne, so it's not like they were innocent really. So yeah, this death won't make you cry, but it's a bit of a shame. Jessie was Rick's love interest, and her as an individual has a pretty sad backstory due to the fact she was beaten by her husband Pete. Ultimately, her and her family were just vastly underprepared for the apocalypse, and definitely didn't, minus Ron maybe, deserve to be turned into dinner for walkers. So for the fact I never really liked Denise, Eastman appears in only a singular episode, and Diana's death just isn't that sad or emotional, Jessie kind of takes the win by default. So the saddest death in season 6 is Jessie Anderson's. Season 7, probably the one you were all waiting for, and with the introduction of Negan and the Saviours, we of course get some deaths that would change the course of the show forever. A quick shout out has to go to Olivia, who is shot unexpectedly in episode 8, which is a pretty shocking and sad death, but of course let's move on to the heavy hitters now. Firstly, there's Sasha's death. Now this isn't exactly sad in my opinion, as she does a heroic thing by killing herself in an attempt to infect Negan. It was smart, and it lined up with her character and made her whole selfish storyline come full circle. I think after losing Bob, then Tyrese, and finally Abraham, Sasha's time had finally come, and her death was seen as a motivation for our group to fight back against the Saviour's regime. She inspired the rebellion, so for those reasons, although it was incredibly sad losing Sasha, I think in many ways it was spun into a positive. Now, getting into the territory of utterly heartbreaking, we of course have Abraham Ford. Now his death is often overshadowed by a certain someone else I will get onto, but Abraham's death was so brutal. It came at a time he'd just found purpose again, he'd fallen in love with Sasha, and he wanted a kid, and played a huge role in our group's survival. So having him die at the hands of Negan was not only incredibly graphic, but also really sad. I think Abraham as a character had a lot left to give us, so it was a real shame that his story ended in this way. But of course, what you've all been waiting for, the saddest death in season 7 is of course Glenn Rhee. Everybody's favourite pizza delivery guy, Glenn had been a staple in the show's lineup since its debut in 2010. I mean, many of us had grown up alongside Glenn, and this light-hearted pure soul didn't deserve what is probably the most graphic and gory death in the entire show. His character development was inspiring, he was just about to be a father, and overall he just kept this light-hearted tone to an extremely harrowing show. Glenn's death is probably the most infamous in television history, and it caused viewing numbers to absolutely plummet because so many fans were distraught, they simply refused to carry on watching the show. Look, Glenn didn't deserve his fate, it upset a lot of viewers, and seeing him being beaten to death by Negan as Maggie and the others looked on was absolutely soul-crushing. And after his death, the entire tone of the show changed to a much darker and bleaker one, and I think a huge part of what makes this death so sad is it demonstrated even the kindest of souls are so vulnerable in the evil world of the apocalypse. So for those reasons, Glenn is of course the saddest death in season 7. Season 8 sees the conclusion of the Saviour War, and for a storyline that contains the word war, not many named characters actually die in this season. Firstly, Tobin's death is pretty sad I guess, as we'd known him for 3 seasons, and he dies in the siege on Hilltop by Simon and the Saviours, becoming infected due to the walker flesh on the Saviour's weapons. And the runner-up to season 8 doesn't even go to a human being. Yes, Shiva's death is probably the second saddest in season 8, as she sacrifices herself for King Ezekiel. Yes, you did hear that right, a tiger sacrifices itself for a human being. So rest in peace to Shiva, you were without a doubt my favourite tiger in the entire series. But of course, winning by quite some margin is Carl Grimes. From the very beginning of the show, Carl Grimes was more than just a survivor. He was Rick's reason to keep going and a driving force for the narrative, whilst also offering a symbol of hope for the future. The baffling decision to kill off Carl is not only one of the worst decisions in television history, but is tragic for a plethora of reasons. Not only does Rick lose his driving force, the show kind of loses its core theme of a father and son dynamic, and on top of this, Carl Grimes as a character had so much more to give us, as we saw in the comics. But look, although the decision to kill off Carl was one that would see another huge decline in viewership, the actual episode he dies in, titled Honor, is pretty good. In terms of the fact it's sad and very well made, Carl is a character we'd literally seen grow up on our screen, and when he was bitten by a walker in season 8, it wasn't only shocking but utterly tragic. Carl's final act in saving everyone from the attack on Alexandria and welcoming Sadik into the community demonstrated just how far he'd come from the kid in season 2 who toyed with a walker and got Dale killed. I also think Carl's death is made even sadder by the fact it's stretched out across multiple episodes as Rick comes to terms with not just his death, but reading Carl's letters, the flashback scenes with Rick and him on the farm, the recall to his mum's speech in season 3, and of course the sound of the gunshot ringing off as he ends his own life before reanimating, and panning out to see Rick and Michonne's reaction in the now scorched Alexandria is utterly devastating. The character reactions, the death of someone we'd seen grow up in the apocalypse, and in many ways the future of the franchise, Carl's death was so tragic from not only a storytelling perspective, but from a deeply personal one for many fans. So for those reasons, Carl Grimes is of course the saddest death in season 8 of The Walking Dead. Season 9 of The Walking Dead sees the introduction of the Whisperers, a hostile group who kill a lot of characters. Firstly, Jesus' death is fairly sad, but once again leans more onto the side of shocking, and it sets up the storyline of the whole Whisperer War as we get our first glimpse of what they are truly capable of. Now, many of the character deaths in Season 9 all come in the exact same episode, that of course being the calm before. And the Pike deaths are one of the most infamous scenes in the entire show, as we of course get the deaths of Tara, Henry, Enid, Addie, and several other characters. Out of this bunch, I think the saddest death would have to be Henry though, just based on the reaction of Carol and how Henry's death basically destroys her life. It haunts her, ruins her relationship with Ezekiel and Daryl for a period of time, it isolates her, and turns her into a liability hell set on revenge. Look, Henry is a bit stupid in season 9, but he most definitely did not deserve to be decapitated and put on a spike. I think this death is especially tragic because it's the 4th kid Carol has essentially adopted and lost. I'm starting to think it might actually be a Carol problem at this point because Sophia, Mika, Lizzie, and then Henry have all ended up dying. I mean, she really can't catch a break, and it just further adds to the sadness of this death. Also, the fact that the person who killed Henry was his own girlfriend's mum adds for a pretty bleak showing. The Pike deaths as a whole was pretty disturbing, especially in the manner in which they all died. I mean, Henry's literally a kid, so it really did demonstrate just how insane Alpha was. Also, the effect his death has on the kingdom as a community is something worth considering here as well. Ezekiel falls into a state of deep depression, Carol leaves, and the kingdom slowly crumbles. So I think due to the reaction from others, the brutal manner in which he was killed, and the fact he was still a kid, means Henry's death was the saddest from season 9. Again, season 10 is probably one of the easiest in terms of choosing the saddest deaths, because not many main characters really die. Character redemptions like Gamma's were cut tragically short, but it's not like anyone was left devastated by her death. And in second place, I'd probably give Earl's death, as he dies trying to protect the kids of Hilltop, and it is pretty sad watching him slowly realise his fate as he's been bitten by a walker. But of course, the saddest death in season 10 is Sadik's. Since the Pike massacres in season 9, Sadik had been struggling with severe PTSD after being forced by Alpha to watch the murder of his friends, and his death comes just as he's starting to find some stability and entered into a relationship with Rosita. The most brutal part of Sadik's death is it came from Dante, a man he trusted, worked with, and lived alongside. After Sadik realised Dante had been a Whisperer's spy the entire time, Dante strangles him to death, which is a deeply intimate way to go out, staring back at the person who betrayed you and is about to take your life. But without a doubt, the most tragic part of Sadik's death is the fact it meant Carl's sacrifice was for nothing essentially. Carl died trying to bring this man into the community, and for him to have a little impact on the narrative and die less than 2 seasons later meant that Carl's whole sacrifice felt a little bit pointless. Sadik had a lot more left to offer, and I wish he'd stayed around for longer in the story. But I think the timing of his death, just as things were starting to look up for him, and who it actually was taking his life, makes Sadik's demise probably the saddest from season 10. Season 11 is the final season of The Walking Dead, and we actually get a few sad deaths. Firstly, Alden, a character who had been in the show since season 8 and had been in a relationship with Enid previously, meets his demise after an altercation with the Reapers, making for a pretty sad death. And Luke, who dies in the Walker invasion on the Commonwealth, is a character I never really felt any real attachment to, but to see him die was pretty emotional nevertheless. But the saddest death in season 11 is of course Rosita Espinosa. After 7 long seasons in the series, this fan favourite meets her demise in the season finale. Once again, she is bitten by a walker in the invasion on the Commonwealth, while saving her daughter Coco. This incident makes the whole final act of the show feel so bittersweet, as her final hours are spent surrounded by the people she had fought all these years alongside, and on one hand she did get the opportunity to say one last goodbye to everyone, an opportunity that many characters on this list never got, but on the other hand it's painful to watch her slowly succumb to her illness surrounded by her post-apocalyptic family. Ultimately, Rosita's death is the saddest in season 11 because it's layered with both personal sacrifice and emotional closure. The series bows out on what is a pretty high note in post-apocalyptic terms, but her death really does put a downer on the episode. Rosita especially blossomed in season 11 and it was such a shame to see her die. But that being said, I do think it was the right narrative choice, as we did need a character a bit bigger than Luke to die. But yeah, it's an extremely emotional moment, and for that reason, Rosita's death is the saddest character death in season 11. But with that being said, that is my pick for the saddest character death in every single season of The Walking Dead. But let me know down below in the comments if you agree/disagree with my takes, as I would love to hear your opinions. If you did enjoy today's video, please do like and subscribe as it helps the channel out massively. And we are also well on the way to 20,000 subscribers, so thank you all so much. But once again, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.